It is 11:47 on a Thursday night in October 1943. Elwood Cato is standing on a Harlem rooftop with a cigarette burning down between two fingers, watching a pigeon lose its mind in a tin tray of water. The bird's name is Congressman. He is a blue bar racing homer, the best bird on the roof, and right now he is throwing water in every direction like something has gone deeply wrong inside him. Wings spread, body low, that frantic, reckless thrashing that looks almost violent for an animal that weighs less than a pocket watch. Elwood has watched this 100 times. He has always assumed the bird was washing. He has never once asked why. That assumption, the one you are probably carrying right now, the same one Elwood carried for 30 years on that rooftop, is wrong. Not partially wrong, completely wrong. In a way that changes everything you think you understand about what you have been watching. Because what Congressman is doing in that tin tray has almost nothing to do with cleanliness. It has everything to do with survival. And before this story ends, you are going to watch a bird do something so strange, so deliberate, so precise, pressing live ants into its own feathers one by one on a Harlem rooftop on a cold November afternoon, that Elwood's first instinct was to stop it. He thought the bird had gone mad. It hadn't. It was the sanest thing on that rooftop. Stay until the end. Roach didn't say much when Elwood first brought Congressman in. He just laid the bird on his examination table, spread one wing under the lamp, and pointed. The feather looked simple. It wasn't. Roach traced it slowly with one finger, the central shaft, then the branches extending from it, then the smaller branches off those, interlocking with each other in a structure so fine it was almost invisible. Like a zipper, he said. A microscopic zipper running the entire length of every feather on that bird. When it locks, the feather works. When it separates, it doesn't. No lift, no insulation, no water shedding, just a piece of equipment that has quietly stopped functioning. And normal life pulls it apart constantly. Every time Congressman pushed through the coop door, every wire landing, every jostle at the feed tray, the zipper opening, one small separation at a time. Bathing wets the barbules, Roach said, softens them, makes re-interlocking possible when the bird preens afterward. The water is not removing filth. It is resetting survival-critical equipment. Elwood stared at the feather under the lamp for a long moment. He had watched that bird bathe 100 times. He had never once understood what he was looking at. Roach didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. Roach asked him, almost casually, why he'd moved the water tray. Elwood told him about the hawk, a red-tail, circling low one morning the previous spring, riding the thermals off the building's south face. He'd watched it for 20 minutes. The next morning, he moved the tray to the far corner of the roof. Away from the open sky, away from anything that could drop fast from above. He thought he was being smart, thought he was removing a danger. Roach was quiet for a moment. Then he explained what Elwood hadn't known. A bird that has just bathed cannot fly properly. Waterlogged feathers kill aerodynamic performance. For 60 to 90 seconds after a full bath, a bird's escape response is genuinely compromised. Slower takeoff, reduced speed, none of the precise evasive flight that lets a small bird survive open air. That window is real and it cannot be eliminated. Every bird that bathes accepts it. What you can do, Roach said, is manage it. Keep the water close enough to cover that the bird can reach safety in that window.
Cornell recommends within 10 feet.
Elwood's tray was 23 feet from the coop wall. The birds had been rushing their baths for months, cutting them short, getting half the benefit at double the risk. He'd moved the tray to protect them. He'd just moved the danger closer. 2 years ago, Elwood had the rooftop cleaned up proper. The dirt patches along the base of the coop wall had bothered him for a long time. Ragged, unprofessional. The kind of thing that made a careful man look careless. He'd had them swept out on a Saturday morning and laid flat tar paper down in their place. Clean lines, neat edges. The roof looked like it belonged to someone who had things under control. Roach pulled a small glass slide from his kit and held it under the lamp. Elwood leaned in and saw them, flat, pale, almost translucent. Feather lice, wingless, invisible to a casual eye, living deep inside the feather structure, feeding on the barbules themselves. He asked if they'd wash off. No, Roach said. Lice evolved specifically to survive immersion. Water doesn't reach them. What kills them is fine dust. Worked deep into the feather structure, it clogs their respiratory pores and smothers them. Birds with regular access to dust bathing sites carry significantly lower parasite loads. It had been studied. It was documented. Congressman's lice count was high, had been climbing for months. Roach set the slide down. That bare dirt, he said quietly, was not an eyesore. It was a medical facility. And Elwood had paved it over because it didn't look right. Roach turned the bird over gently and pointed to a small raised bump at the base of the tail. Easy to miss. Elwood had never noticed it in 30 years. Preen gland, Roach said. Uropygial gland. Every time you've watched this bird work its beak through its feathers after a bath. That slow, methodical pass across every surface. It wasn't just straightening things out. It was pressing its beak to that gland, collecting a small amount of waxy oil, and distributing it deliberately across the entire feather coat, section by section. Nothing skipped. The oil waterproofs. Preserves flexibility. Keeps the feather from going brittle and snapping under stress. And research published in Functional Ecology had documented something else. Antimicrobial properties, active specifically against the bacteria and fungi that colonize feather structures from the inside out. But the sequence mattered. The bath had to come first. Softened barbules absorb the oil evenly. Degraded, dry surfaces don't. The oil sits on top, penetrates unevenly, protects nothing properly. Without the bath, the oil fails. Without the oil, the feathers fail. The two were never separate steps. They were one system. Elwood had watched this bird perform that ritual 10,000 times. He'd seen the preening. He'd never seen the gland. Never understood the oil. He'd been watching the wrong thing his whole life. It happens on a Tuesday in November, just before the light goes. Elwood is on the roof watching the birds settle when Congressman breaks from the group and walks slowly to the far corner. The corner where the soil used to be. He stops at the tar paper, turns, and finds the one small crack in the coping stone where an ant colony has been quietly building all autumn. Elwood watches the bird pick up a single ant, hold it in his beak for half a second, then press it, deliberately, with force, into the underside of his wing. Then another, wings spreading, body dropping low, movements fast and repetitive, beak driving into the feather surface with a pressure that looked wrong. Urgent, almost violent. Elwood stepped forward. A hand closed on his arm from behind. Roche, who had come up the stairwell without a sound, was standing just behind his shoulder. "Don't," he said quietly. The ants release formic acid when threatened. Research from the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology had documented it precisely. Toxic to feather lice and mites at exactly the concentrations a bird can deliver by pressing them against its own feathers. Congressman wasn't malfunctioning. He was selecting a tool, choosing the right species, provoking the right chemical response, applying it to the exact regions where his parasite load ran deepest. Roach didn't take his eyes off the bird. "That bird knows exactly what he's doing," he said. "The question is whether you do." Roach sat down on an overturned crate and was quiet for a moment, the way a man gets quiet when he is about to say something that cannot be unsaid. 5 behaviors, he said finally. 5 functions. Not one of them optional. Water bathing resets the feather structure. The vulnerability window gets managed, not eliminated, managed. Because you cannot eliminate it without destroying the thing you are trying to protect. Dust bathing controls parasites mechanically. The preen oil sequence waterproofs the surface and holds off the bacteria and fungi working from the inside. Anting deploys chemistry against the same parasites the dust addresses by suffocation. Each one covers what the others cannot reach. Pull any single piece and the system holds for a while. Compensates, adjusts, finds a way. Then it stops compensating. Then it fails. Elwood stared out across the rooftop. He had removed the soil, moved the water, disrupted the cover distance. Each decision made slowly. Over 2 years, each one with a reason attached that had seemed at the time completely sound. The bird had compensated. Congressman had found workarounds, managed the gaps, kept racing on a system that was quietly coming apart beneath him. Until he couldn't anymore. Roach didn't say the rest of it. He didn't need to. Both men were already thinking it. That Elwood had been doing the same thing to himself, piece by piece and year by year for a great deal longer than 2 years. He spent a week on it. No one asked why. No one on the roof crew said a word when Elwood showed up Monday morning and started pulling up tar paper with his bare hands. Bare soil went back into the corners. The water tray came off the far wall and went down 9 feet from the coop. Clear sight lines in every direction, no blind angles, close enough to cover that a bird could make it in the window. He measured it twice, got it right. By Wednesday, the bathing pattern had already shifted. Longer sessions, proper post-bath perching on the low wire, wings slightly dropped, the full preening sequence running start to finish the way it was supposed to. On Friday afternoon, he watched Congressman walk to the corner, find the ant colony in the coping crack, and begin pressing them into his feathers one by one. This time, Elwood didn't move. He stood at the roof door with his tea in his coat pockets and watched the bird work, precise, deliberate, running every system in sequence, and understood, in a way that settled somewhere below his ribs, exactly what he had been doing to himself. Removing exposure points, sealing off vulnerability, keeping everything clean on the surface while the structure underneath came quietly apart. The question wasn't whether he'd confront Doyle. It was whether he could survive what that confrontation was going to cost him. Roach had told him once, almost as an aside, that anting was classified as pathological behavior for nearly 30 years. 30 years. Trained ornithologists watching birds press ants into their own feathers and writing it up as malfunction. Nervous disorder. Aberrant stress response, a bird coming apart at the seams. It took decades of careful, unglamorous lab work before the fields accepted what the birds had been doing all along. Precise, intentional, chemically sophisticated parasite control. The uropygeal gland's antimicrobial function wasn't confirmed until the late 1940s. The relationship between barbule alignment and thermoregulation. How a misaligned feather on a cold night could push a small bird past the edge of its fat reserves and into death only became clear when researchers finally stopped, assuming they already understood the system they were studying. The science was there the whole time, visible, repeatable, happening in backyards across the country in broad daylight. Nobody saw it because nobody thought there was anything left to see. Elwood stood at the roof's edge and looked out over 133rd Street. He thought about Doyle, how long he'd watched that situation and called it manageable. His own operation, the slow erosion he'd mistaken for stability, the rooftop himself, everything he'd observed carefully and understood wrong. He went on a Wednesday, December 3rd, 1943, cold enough that his breath showed on the subway stairs. The federal building on Lower Broadway smelled like floor wax and old paper. The investigator was a thin man named Purcell, who had been building his case for 2 years and had the patience of someone who understood that some things could not be rushed. Elwood sat down across from him and put a manila envelope on the desk. Dates, amounts, names. 2 years of documentation kept in a locked box under a floorboard on 133rd Street, assembled one careful entry at a time. He showed everything. His operation, his exposure, the full vulnerability window, open and undefended, the way it had to be. Purcell didn't say much. He didn't have to. Doyle was indicted the following August. Elwood's operation was not touched. That had been negotiated before he ever sat down, the terms clear, the agreement honored. But the negotiation had required showing everything first. You could not bargain from hiding. You could not protect what you loved by sealing it off from the world and calling that safety. That winter, Congressman won 3 consecutive races. The last one finished at dusk, the light going amber and flat over the Hudson. Elwood was on the roof when the bird came in, fast and low and absolutely precise, dropping onto the landing board like he'd been doing it his whole life, which he had. Only now all the systems were running the way they were built to run. Not clean, exactly. Built to last. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever watched something you love fail slowly because you were trying to protect it from the wrong things? I read everyone. I'll see you in the next story.